This is the Twin City News Around Town. A closer look at the people, places, and events around Batesburg, Leesville, Gilbert, and the Ridge. Presented by the Twin City News, Batesburg, Leesville's community journalism since 1925.
Hi, this is Tony Bauman from the Twin City News on the grounds of the South Carolina State House. And this coming Tuesday, your South Carolina legislature, the South Carolina Senate and the House, will gather. They'll gavel in for the new session, and all throughout this coming year, they'll be making, debating, and hopefully passing some legislation that will improve the quality of life here in the Palmetto State. Well, earlier today, throughout this day, I had the opportunity to visit with members of the legislature here at a South Carolina legislative workshop presented by the South Carolina Broadcasters Association, our own South Carolina Press Association, and the Associated Press. And a wide variety of issues were discussed. After that session, I had the opportunity to catch up with Senator Shane Massey to talk with him about the upcoming issues of this session of your General Assembly. Well, Senator, let's talk in general terms about the legislative section next week. What do you see as the top 5 issues that are going to come out of the General Assembly this year?
Well, I think you're going to see on the Senate side, at least, we're going to start with education reform. That big bill has been having a lot of conversations. They've gone around the state talking to teachers, parents, business leaders to try to get updates, ideas on what they think we need to be doing in the K-12 system. We're going to come out of the gate with that. So you're probably going to see the debate begin on that next week, even though it's the first week. And don't know how long that's going to take. It could take a while. It could take a week. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. At some point, Santee Cooper is going to come, and we'll have to deal with that. That really could take a long time, depending on what the report looks like and how the conversation goes once we get moving. I think there's going to be a lot of conversation this year about money because of the additional revenue that we have that's been recognized and the budget and things along those lines. And then I think, we didn't talk about this with the group in there, but I think just to be realistic, as much as we would like for this not to be a factor, elections are going to be a factor because you've got the entire General Assembly up this year, and filing is in mid to late March. So that's going to have an impact towards the end of the session about whether people are going to be willing to spend as much time up here because of that. Well,
and you mentioned it, of course, that there is this word that is bandied about the surplus. And when you were talking in the caucus gathering today, you were talking about that you felt like that those nearly $1 billion or over $500 million should be in some form or fashion turned back to the taxpayers in this state.
Yeah, I think you need to take this opportunity to do some much needed tax reform, whether it be on property taxes or the taxes that manufacturers pay and the manufacturers that employ a lot of South Carolinians, or you can take a look at income taxes as well, or even take a look at the sales tax and the sales tax exemptions. I think you need to look at the overall tax structure, but you have the opportunity to do this year what so many people have been talking about for years. With tax reform possibilities. So I think we ought to look at that. Now, whether we will is another question, but I think this would be an opportunity to look at it.
That's a political, certainly as a political minefield, or it's also a political poppy field, as it were. Tax reform, tax cuts, that type of thing, particularly in an election year, can be exploited, for lack of a better word.
Sure. No, I think it could be exploited by either side, no matter what you do, and it could be exploited in any year, but especially in an election year. I think that's true. But I think so often what you hear is tax reform talked about during election years, and then in non-election years, nothing happens with it. Well, this year, with the money that you've got in there, you've got the opportunity to actually do something if you really want to do it.
Last year, we famously, right here, not too far from where we're standing, 10,000 plus educators marched on the State House asking for better working conditions, salaries, and that type of thing. How likely do you think that some sort of tax or income increase for teachers or improved conditions for teachers are going to come out of the legislature this year?
I think you're likely to see both. The bill that we're going to take up in the very beginning is focused primarily on working conditions. and helping alleviate many of those problems that we heard about. It's not perfect, but it does address a lot of those things we heard about. And then, of course, the pay is going to come in the budget part, but I think you're likely to see an increase for teacher pay this year as well.
And one of the issues that, as a matter of fact, the second half of the day, one of the issues going to be talked about, and your Edgefield, Batesburg, Leesville, Saluda, those areas are all around us. Rural broadband. You said in the session that you felt like that was principally the purview of the private sector, but what can the state, what can the legislature do to promote an environment for increased rural access to broadband?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's an extremely important issue. I mean, look, broadband, in my opinion, has become essential infrastructure in the 21st century. It's essentially like water and sewer of generations ago. I mean, it is that important. So I think it's important that we look at it, and especially in the rural areas where you tend to have the least people with access to it. So I think there's a role for government there, but I think it's more in the incentivizing and encouraging the private sector to do what they've already begun. I mean, look, if you look at some of the big carriers that are out there, depending on where you are in the state, it could be AT&T, it could be Verizon, it could be Charter. In some of our area, you have the co-op. Mid-Carolina Electric has taken that step in there, which I'm pleased to see. But they already have a lot of the infrastructure in place. They need to expand it. They need to extend it into different areas. So if there are things that we can do to help encourage that, to facilitate that, then I think that's what we ought to look at, as opposed to government getting in and doing it itself.
Because you said that if the government's involved in this.
I mean, look, it took DSS over 25 years to get a computer system running, right? And I think that's pretty typical. The private sector have incentives. They have different things they have to consider that the government doesn't really have to consider. And so I think you need to take advantage of that, take advantage of what they've already done, encourage them to go a little bit further.
Government will mess it up, though, if they try to get into the broadband business. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think that happens with lots of things. Now, there are a few things, hopefully, the government does do right. But lots of times, if you look at the incentives that are in place in the private sector, they tend to respond to things a lot better, and they can make it cheaper than if government were involved in it. So, yeah, that would be my preference. But I do think we've made progress in the last year, in that there's a lot more conversation about rural broadband now than there used to be, even than there was a year ago. So that conversation is good. Conversation usually leads to action, but you're not going to get the action without the conversation first. So even though it's frustratingly slow, I do think we're making progress there, and I'm hopeful that we'll take some steps in that direction this year.
Senator Shane Massey, Senator representing portions of our readership area of the Twin City News. Now that I'm on the grounds of the South Carolina State House, at least today, I find I like it here. So all throughout this legislative session, I'm going to be coming back and visiting with your lawmakers. We're going to try to sit down and have those important and pertinent conversations with those folks who represent you here at the South Carolina State House. So, Senator Katrina Shealy, Representative Cal Forrest, Senator Nikki Setzler, those who represent you in this august body, we're going to try to have those conversations, and of course Senator Massey throughout the year. We are going to have those conversations to keep you up to date on what's happening in your General Assembly here at your State House. So keep up to date. We'll update you periodically with the Twin City News. And thank you for your support of your community journalism since 1925. From the State House, I'm Tony Ballman.